Jimmy's father had disappeared many years ago. Then his mother was killed when he was an infant. An older woman adopted him, and she cared for Jimmy as best she could. In fact, Jimmy became quite attached to this older person, as if she were his mom. But time was not on her side, so when Jimmy was nearly 4 years old, she had to find someone else to care for her little charge. Jimmy was placed with a group of other homeless infants and juveniles, monitored by a man named Gary. Just days after the drop-off, Jimmy stopped eating. He looked depressed. He began to lose weight quickly. Jimmy was checked medically, and everything else otherwise was fine. Precipitated by the separation from his primary caregiver, little Jimmy's state of mind was a turmoil of consternation. In spite of his company, offers of play, food, and care by Gary, Jimmy was clearly in mental distress. Tentatively and with reluctance, Jimmy seemed to accept his new circumstances and began showing some signs of interest in his group friends. But his situation was delicate. He was still not eating and given vitamin shots. There was gradual improvement, and in time, he began to eat very small amounts. This was about 4 weeks after his admission to the facility, and Jimmy was still quite psychologically fragile. Early in the 3rd month of his stay, Jimmy was unexpectedly visited by the elderly woman who had previously cared for him. Jimmy was overcome with joy, thinking he was going to be taken home. But that was not the case. The hugs and embraces of comfort rapidly became tears of separation and departure. Once the woman was gone, clearly forever out of Jimmy's life, he began a quick and sudden downward spiral into irrevocable depression. He refused to eat. Gary administered medications and tried force feeding, but to no avail. Jimmy literally wasted away in sadness. By the middle of the 3rd month of his stay at the group home, Jimmy died in Gary's arms. Shockingly, in his depressed condition, he had lost the will to live because of the separation from his mom. This story of Jimmy reminds me of another account reported recently in national news. Hope, a mother, was with her infant, and the two were minding their own business as they searched for food. Local people did not like Hope and saw her as a threat to their way of life. So they shot her 74 times with a pellet gun, nearly killing her and blinding her. A teenage boy pulled from Hope's weakened embrace, the infant clinging to its mother for dear life. The teenager was poor and thought he could sell the baby. Am I talking about humans? I could be, considering the current state of affairs, but I'm not. Jimmy, Hope, and Hope's baby are all orangutans. Gary is human. He's a primatologist who told me the story of Jimmy. Indeed, as Jimmy's caretaker, he suffered his own torment watching the juvenile he lovingly attended grieve and then die. These are tragedies that should never occur. Why do they? In the case of Hope, local farmers perceive her and other orangutans as pests. This is because agricultural conglomerates, mining industries, and logging concerns are decimating rainforests in Sumatra, Borneo, Africa, and elsewhere. These forests, like those in South America, are the lungs of the world and could stave off further global warming if left to flourish. With the degradation of their habitats, the apes have nowhere to go, cross an imperceptible border, and wander into human farms and settlements. At that point, they are shot dead, burned alive, or hacked to pieces by machetes. Adult females are killed for their babies, which are trafficked globally on a black market. Dead apes are mutilated. Their body parts are sold internationally as magical totems, or the flesh is marketed and eaten as bushmeat. The teenage boy who ripped Hope's infant from her arms faces charges, since there are laws protecting apes in these countries. However, the laws are not strictly enforced. Needless to say, the baby died without its mother. The boy's father asked, "Why is my son's life worth less than that of an orangutan?" What is the value of any life? All life on this planet is worthy of respect in its own way. Philosopher Tom Reagan, in this regard, has made the case for animal rights. There might be some exceptions, of course, such as bacteria and viruses that could destroy all other life forms. But if you know anything about what people refer to as animals, then you know in the case of many species, especially mammals, that every individual has a distinct personality, is consciously aware of itself and others, has a will to live, and acts with care and concern for offspring, kin, and others in the group. Moral philosopher Mark Rowlands published a book in 2012 called "Can Animals Be Moral?" A few years later, he followed that up with a book called "Can Animals Be Persons?" Though the book titles come in the form of questions, Rowland answers affirmatively, using empirical evidence and logic. My own work in this area confirms Rowland's findings, and there are many philosophers, from Peter Singer to Bernard Rowland, who assert similar claims connecting animal rights and human morality. In Genesis, the God invokes humans to have dominion over all animals. Does that mean that humans can raise billions of cows, sheep, goats, pigs, chickens, turkeys, geese, and fish every year, only to slaughter them in factory farms and use every conceivable body part for commercial products and food? As an ethical vegan, I'd have to say no. Does that mean that humans are stewards of animals and the planet? I'd answer this in the negative too, based on each species' long evolutionary history. The word dominion comes from the Latin word for master. We are not masters of the planet or of willful creatures who exhibit sentience and sapience any more than we are masters of other people. Might I suggest instead of using the word dominion that we switch to an Indo-European word, domus, or dwelling. We share this small, pale blue dot, as astronomer Carl Sagan has called it, with all creatures, whether earthworms, bumblebees, Arctic foxes, beavers, elephants, whales, or chimpanzees. Biologist James Lovelock championed a revolutionary idea in 1979 that suggests the surface of the planet, the oceans, and the atmosphere combine in a self-regulating system. This means that the Earth itself is a gigantic organism of which we humans are but a part. Elimination of the parts, like the orangutans who service the Indonesian rainforests, or burning of Amazonian forests to raise cows sold in supermarkets as steak, sets off a chain reaction of negative environmental effects. Do you think we are beginning to suffer the consequences of our own intemperance? In Ephesians, Paul says that we are all adopted by Jesus Christ. Do you think that Jesus would turn a blind eye to the persecution we inflict on animals and the destruction of their habitats? More to the point, where is the Jesus in each of us who would, in effect, adopt an action-oriented, caring attitude for all living creatures, their ecosystems, and this one planet we all share? Thank you for listening.